My daughter was sure I hadn't seen her pour that weird stuff into my soup, but not a single detail escaped my notice. As soon as her back was turned, I swapped our bowls, making her wicked plan her downfall.
Dad,
what happened
what's
to her
wrong?
next was unbelievable. Before we continue, please hit the subscribe button,
I know my rights.
and in the comments, let me know your current time. A sudden fierce agony slammed into my stomach, forcing me to collapse onto the kitchen's cool floor tiles. My hands gripped my midsection, fingers clawing at my flesh as if I could somehow squeeze the pain away. Sweat beaded on my brow, even though the evening air from the open window was cool. "Dad!" Teresa's voice cut through my ragged gasps. "What's wrong?" I tried to speak, but a choked sound was all I could manage. The torment twisted deeper, like a creature tearing its way through my insides. My vision blurred as I struggled to focus on my daughter's worried face above me. "Something's wrong," I finally managed to croak. "Feels like my stomach is being shredded from the inside." Teresa knelt beside me, her hands fluttering over my shoulders. "You look horrible, Dad. Your face is all gray." Her voice held a familiar concern, but an unnerving, almost eager quality lay hidden beneath it, a feeling that made my skin crawl despite the agony. She placed her palm against my forehead with a practiced touch. "You're burning up. When did this begin?" "About an hour ago," I read after lunch. "That sandwich I made you." Her eyes widened with what seemed like genuine worry. Maybe the turkey was bad. I should have checked the expiration date. The refrigerator's low hum and the grandfather clock's precise ticking felt overwhelmingly loud and sharp against my suffering. I studied Teresa's face as she helped me up, searching for something I couldn't identify. "Let me prepare some light soup for you tonight," she said, her smile stretching unnaturally wide across her face. "Something gentle for your stomach." "Thank you, sweetheart." The words came out on their own, a reflex from decades of being a father. "You always take such good care of me." "Of course, Dad. It's the least I can do." Her strange smile never faded. Her eyes, however, were too bright and calculating, holding the same look she had as a teenager when she'd missed curfew and tried to convince me she was at the library. I was too weak to properly analyze her expression, too grateful for her help to question the rising unease in my chest. The fading daylight cast long shadows across the kitchen floor. The walls were lined with family photos, Teresa's graduation, my wedding, past Christmas mornings. All those memories felt distant, separated from this moment by an unseen barrier I couldn't understand. "I think I need to lie down," I said, one hand still pressed against my belly. "That's a good idea." Teresa's voice was a pitch higher than normal. "Rest while I make something special for dinner. You'll feel better after you eat." I simply nodded, unable to trust my voice. Each breath took conscious effort, and the simple act of standing upright demanded all my focus. But as I turned toward the staircase, I caught Teresa's reflection in the window glass. Her smile was gone the moment she thought I wasn't looking, replaced by a cold, determined expression. My military training whispered warnings I couldn't yet understand. After 3 decades in the Army, I'd learned to trust my gut feelings about people. And right now, every instinct was screaming danger. But this was my daughter, the little girl who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms. I gripped the banister, each step up to my bedroom feeling like a huge effort. Teresa's voice echoed behind me, filled with false promises of care. I collapsed onto the edge of my bed, the mattress groaning under my weight. The climb up those 13 steps had drained what little energy I had left. Outside my window, dusk painted the street in shades of amber and gray. My eyes fell on the knitstand where Margaret's photograph smiled back at me. It had been 10 years since cancer took her, and I still reached for her perfume bottle in times like these. The glass felt smooth and cold against my fingers, a tangible connection to better days. The pain in my stomach was fading, replaced by a different kind of unease. Something about Teresa's actions downstairs bothered me, triggering memories I had tried to forget. She was 16 when everything began to fall apart. I could still picture her standing in this very room, tears streaming down her face, her fists clenched. "You hate me," she had screamed, her voice raw with grief. Mom would never have stopped me from going to that party. I had tried to comfort her, but my words came out all wrong. "I'm protecting you. You don't know how dangerous the world can be." Margaret would have known what to say. She had always been the bridge between Teresa's free spirit and my strict discipline. Without her, we were two broken people speaking different languages. The memory shifted to a year later. Teresa, at 17, dressed in revealing clothes, her makeup applied with a teenage defiance. "Everyone else is going," she had argued, clutching car keys I had forbidden her to use. "You can't keep me locked up forever. As long as you live under my roof," I had started. "Then maybe I won't live here much longer." The threat hung between us like a knife. True to her word, she left the day after her 18th birthday. I watched from this same window as she packed everything that mattered to her into her car. No goodbye hug, no glance back, just the slam of a car door and the sound of tires on gravel. For 10 years, contact had been minimal. Birthday cards with no return address. Phone calls that lasted only 3 minutes. I had told myself it was for the best, that she needed space to grow up. Then last month, she appeared on my doorstep with 2 suitcases and empty eyes. "I need a place to stay," she had said, avoiding my gaze. "Just for a while." I welcomed her back without question, desperate to fix what we had lost. Maybe it was guilt or just loneliness. Either way, I had been trying too hard to make up for lost time. The house settled around me with its familiar creaks and sighs. Downstairs, I could hear Teresa moving around the kitchen, opening cabinets and running water. The sounds should have been comforting, evidence of life in a home that had been too quiet for too long. Instead, they filled me with dread. I rubbed my temples, trying to shake the growing certainty that something was very wrong. The stomach pain had been sudden and brutal, unlike anything I had ever felt. And Teresa's reaction. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. A text message from an unknown number. "Checking on you. Hope you're feeling better. T." Teresa was downstairs. Why would she text me instead of just calling? I stared at the message, confusion mixing with the remnants of my physical discomfort. Another sound from the kitchen, the sound of glass hitting the floor, then silence. "Everything okay down there?" I called out. "Fine, Dad." Her voice was falsely cheerful. "Just dropped a spoon." But I had heard glass, not metal. I touched my wedding ring, finding comfort in its familiar weight. Margaret used to say that I worried too much, that my suspicious nature came from having spent too many years in military intelligence. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was seeing threats where there were none. But as I lay there, listening to my daughter's movements, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real Teresa had never truly come home. Teresa's voice drifted up from the kitchen, pulling me back from the past to the uncertain present. I forced myself off the bed and headed toward the stairs. "Dad, the soup's ready." "Come down." "I'm coming, sweetheart." The kitchen was bright with warm overhead light, and the smell of chicken broth filled the air. I stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Teresa had her back to me, hunched over the counter near the stove. Her shoulders moved in quick, deliberate motions. 2 white bowls sat side by side on the granite counter. Steam rose from both, but something about her posture set off alarm bells in my military-trained mind. She was stirring one bowl with intense focus, her movements sharp and urgent. I watched as she reached for a small glass vial, barely larger than my thumb. With practiced ease, she tipped a white powder into the bowl on the left, stirring quickly to dissolve whatever she had added. The motion was swift, expert, as if she had rehearsed it. My breath caught in my throat. Time seemed to slow as the understanding crashed over me like a wave of ice water. My daughter was poisoning my food. Every instinct screamed at me to confront her, to demand answers, to grab her shoulders and shake some sense into her. But 3 decades of tactical training overpowered my emotions. I stayed frozen in the doorway, watching my child become a stranger. Teresa straightened up, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She turned halfway toward me. "Almost ready," she called, her voice unnaturally cheerful. "Just letting it cool a bit." I forced my feet to move, entering the kitchen as if I had seen nothing. "Smells wonderful. You took care of me." "I made this specially for you," she said, gesturing to the bowls with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Should help with your stomach." The left bowl, the poisoned one, was closest to my usual spot at the small kitchen table. She knew my habits. She had planned this down to the last detail. "I'll just grab some bread from the pantry," Teresa said, turning away from the counter. This was my chance. The moment she disappeared into the pantry, I moved with the speed and silence that had kept me alive in hostile territories. 3 quick steps to the counter, I swapped the bowls, then stepped back to my original position. The entire exchange took less than 10 seconds. Teresa emerged with a loaf of whole wheat bread, still wearing that false smile. Perfect timing. Everything's ready. She carried both bowls to the table, placing the poisoned soup directly in front of her chair. I watched as she sat across from me, completely unaware that her deadly plan had been turned back on her. "How does it taste?" she asked as I took the first spoonful. "Perfect. Just what I needed." The soup was quite good. She had always been a decent cook when she made an effort. Teresa took her first sip, and I studied her face for any hint of recognition. Nothing. She continued eating with apparent enjoyment, occasionally glancing at me with what looked like anticipation. Minutes passed in an intense silence, broken only by the scrape of spoons against ceramic. I found myself watching her every move, waiting for the moment when she would realize what was happening. How long before the poison took effect? What had she used? "You seem better already," she noted, dabbing her lips with a napkin. "The color's coming back to your cheeks." "Yes, much better." I managed to keep my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. "Thank you for taking such good care of me." The irony of those words felt like acid in my throat. My daughter, my flesh and blood, had just tried to murder me, and she was sitting across from me, making small talk while unknowingly consuming her poison. "I should probably get some rest now," I said, pushing back from the table. "Let this settle." "Of course." Teresa stood as well, beginning to clear the dishes. "I'll clean up down here." I noticed she avoided looking directly at her bowl, now nearly empty. Was she feeling anything yet? Was the reaction delayed? "Good night, sweetheart." "Good night, Dad. Sweet dreams." The casual endearment felt like a knife between my ribs. I climbed the stairs again, but this time my legs shook, not from illness, but from the terrible knowledge of what my daughter had tried to do. The wooden stairs creaked beneath my weight as I climbed back to my bedroom, each step heavier than the last, carrying the awful weight of what I had witnessed. My hands trembled as I closed the door behind me. The simple act of turning the lock provided only a little comfort. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Teresa's hands adding that white powder to my soup. My daughter, the child I'd taught to ride a bicycle, helped with homework, walked down the aisle at her high school graduation, and had tried to kill me. I paced the room like a caged animal, from window to door and back again. The digital clock on my nightstand mocked me with its steady progression. 9:47, 9:48, 9:49. Time crawled forward while my mind raced in circles. What had she put in that soup? Some household poison? Prescription drugs? The questions multiplied faster than I could process them. Where would a 28-year-old get poison? How long had she been planning this? Around midnight, I checked the door locks, then the windows, then walked through the house, verifying every possible entry point. Military habits die hard. And right now, I felt like I was back in hostile territory. The photos on my dresser seemed different now, charged with new meaning. There was Teresa at 16, holding her driver's license with a proud smile. Had she been planning my death even then? At what point had my little girl decided her father needed to die? I pulled out my will from the filing cabinet, studying the beneficiary information by lamplight. Everything went to her. The house, my pension, and life insurance worth $200,000. More than enough motive for someone desperate enough. But why desperate? What had changed since she had returned home last month? She had been secretive about her life, sure, but I had attributed that to embarrassment about her failures. Now I wondered if something darker had been driving her. My phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "Hope you're feeling better tonight. T." She was texting me from downstairs. Or had she left the house? I moved to the window overlooking the driveway. Her car sat empty in the pale moonlight, but a light still glowed from the kitchen windows below. Another memory surfaced, teaching her to make soup when she was 12. Margaret had been in the hospital for tests, and Teresa wanted to surprise her mother with homemade chicken noodle soup when she came home. We had stood in that same kitchen, me guiding her small hands as she stirred the pot. "The secret ingredient is love, Dad," she had said with the earnest wisdom of a child. Tonight, the secret ingredient had been poison. By 2 in the morning, my rage had hardened into something colder, more calculating. This wasn't just betrayal. It was attempted murder. My military training kicked in. The same analytical mindset that had kept me alive in Afghanistan. Assess the threat, gather intelligence, plan the response. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tomorrow, I would confront her with what I knew and watch her reaction. If she tried to deny it, I had evidence. If she tried to run, I'd be ready. The silence from downstairs had been complete for over an hour. Either she was asleep or pretending to be. I found myself listening for any sound: footsteps, doors opening, the creak of floorboards. Nothing. My eyelids felt heavy, but I forced them open. No sleep tonight. Not while a would-be murderer lived under my roof. The first pale light of dawn crept through my curtains as I heard movement in the kitchen below. Teresa was awake. It was time for answers. I dressed slowly, each movement calculated, then made my way downstairs with the grim purpose of a man about to change everything. The morning light streaming through the windows felt harsh and unforgiving, perfect for what was about to happen. Teresa sat hunched over the kitchen table, still in yesterday's clothes, her face pale and drawn. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she clutched her stomach with both hands. When she looked up at me, I saw genuine pain and confusion there. "Dad," she whispered, her voice weak, "I feel terrible. My stomach is on fire. I think I have food poisoning." I poured myself coffee with steady hands, studying her over the rim of my mug. She looked truly ill, which meant the poison was working exactly as intended, just not on its intended target. "That's interesting," I said, settling into the chair across from her. "What exactly did you add to my soup last night?" The color drained from her already pale face. I don't know what you mean, don't you?" I leaned back, maintaining eye contact. "Think carefully, Teresa. What did you put in my food?" "Dad, you're scaring me." She tried to stand but immediately sat back down, clutching her abdomen. "I just made soup, regular soup." I saw everything. My voice carried the cold authority I'd used with subordinates in the army. Every movement, every gesture when you poisoned my food. "You're paranoid." The words came out sharp, desperate. "You're imagining things. I would never." "Then you won't mind that I switched our bowls while you got the bread." The statement hit her like a physical blow. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, her eyes wide with shock and dawning horror. You what?" She stammered. "That's impossible. I watched you add white powder to the left bowl. You served me the right one, thinking I'd get the poisoned soup. But while you were in the pantry, I made a simple adjustment." Teresa's hands flew to her throat, then back to her stomach. No, this can't be happening. You tried to kill your father." Each word fell like a stone between us. "How does your medicine taste?" She lurched to her feet, swaying dangerously. You don't understand. I wasn't trying to hurt you. Then what was in that vial? Vitamins? I needed the money, Dad. I'm in trouble. Tears streamed down her face now, and I thought maybe if you just got sick enough to go to the hospital, you thought you'd inherit faster. The rage I'd held in check all night finally broke through. You couldn't wait for me to die naturally, so you decided to speed things along. It wasn't supposed to be fatal, she sobbed. Just enough to make you weak, maybe have a heart attack. It would have looked natural. The casual way she discussed my murder chilled me more than outright hatred would have. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was calculated, planned, and rehearsed. Get out. My voice was quieter now, but infinitely more dangerous. Get out of my house. Dad, please. Get out. I roared, standing so quickly my chair toppled backward. You have 10 minutes to pack whatever you can carry, and then I never want to see you again. Teresa stumbled toward the door, then turned back with wild eyes. You can't throw me out. I'm your daughter. My daughter died the moment she put poison in my food. I pulled out my phone. 9 minutes now, unless you'd prefer I call the police instead. She ran then, her footsteps thundering up the stairs. I could hear drawers slamming, objects being thrown into bags. True to her word, she was back in 8 minutes, dragging 2 suitcases behind her. At the front door, she turned one last time. You'll pay for this, she hissed, all pretense of remorse gone. This isn't over. The slam of the front door echoed through the house, leaving me alone with the terrible silence and the knowledge that my daughter had chosen her path. Now I had to choose mine. I walked straight to my study, my sanctuary of order and documentation, where I could think clearly and plan what needed to be done. The familiar smell of leather-bound books and old papers usually calmed me, but today nothing could ease the storm raging in my chest. Methodically, I pulled out a yellow legal pad and began documenting everything I could remember. Timestamps, exact quotes, physical evidence. 30 years of military service had taught me the value of precise records, and I would need every detail if this went to court. 9:47 p.m., observed Teresa adding white substance to soup bowl, I wrote. Substance appeared to be powder, dissolved quickly when stirred. Container, small glass vial, approximately 2 inches tall. My engineer's mind took over, organizing the chaos into manageable data points. What had she used? Where had she gotten it? Most importantly, who else was involved? Teresa wasn't smart enough to plan this alone. I reached for my phone and dialed Emily Carter's number. Emily had been our family lawyer for 15 years, ever since Margaret's cancer diagnosis. If anyone could help me navigate this nightmare, it was her. Emily, it's Simon Brown. I need your help immediately. Simon, good morning. You sound upset. What's wrong? My daughter tried to poison me last night. The words felt surreal as I spoke them. I have evidence. We need to talk today. A long pause. Simon, that's a very serious accusation. Are you certain? I saw her do it. I switched our bowls, and she's been sick all morning from her poison. Can you meet me this afternoon? Of course, my office at 2 o'clock. Perfect. And Emily, we need to discuss changing my will immediately. After hanging up, I pulled out my financial documents, bank statements, investment portfolios, insurance policies, everything Teresa would have inherited. The house alone was worth $500,000, not counting my retirement savings and life insurance. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd worked my entire life to build something for my daughter, and she'd tried to murder me for it. My next call was to the bank. This is Simon Brown, account number 4471. I need to review all account access permissions and beneficiary designations. Of course, Mr. Brown. Is there a specific concern? I need to remove someone immediately. As I worked through the paperwork, fragments of memory surfaced. Teresa's been asking constant questions about my finances over the past month. Her interested in my medication schedule. The way she'd insisted on cooking for me lately, something she'd never done before. How long had she been planning this? And who had put the idea in her head? I thought about her secretive phone calls, the way she'd disappear for hours without explanation. There had to be someone else pulling the strings. Teresa was manipulative and selfish, but she wasn't a killer by nature. Someone had convinced her that murdering her father was not only acceptable, but necessary. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed noon. I had 2 hours before I met with Emily. 2 hours to piece together as much of the puzzle as possible. I opened my laptop and began researching poisons that matched what I'd observed. White powder, quick dissolution, delayed effects. The possibilities were limited, and most pointed toward prescription medications rather than traditional poisons. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You made a mistake. We know where you live." The threat was clear and immediate. Whoever was behind this wasn't finished. They knew about the failed poisoning, which meant Teresa had already contacted them. I screenshotted the message and added it to my growing file of evidence. Time to call in reinforcements. I dialed the non-emergency police line. "This is Simon Brown on Oak Street. I need to report a threat and possibly attempted poisoning. Can someone come take a statement? We can have an officer there within the hour, sir." I spent the remaining time securing the house. New locks on the doors, security system activated, curtains drawn. If they wanted to escalate this situation, I'd be ready. I closed the file drawer with a solid click. My plans were now in motion. Outside, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Teresa was back, and this time she wouldn't be alone. The screech of brakes in my driveway jolted me from my documents. Through the window, I watched Teresa slam her car door with the force of someone ready for war. Her face was flushed with anger, and she moved with the jerky, aggressive steps of someone who'd been building rage for hours. I remained seated in my leather armchair, hands folded calmly in my lap, watching her storm up the front walkway. She didn't knock. The front door burst open with such violence that it struck the wall behind it. "You think you're so clever, don't you, old man?" she screamed, standing in my doorway like an avenging fury. "I think I'm alive," I replied calmly. "Which disappoints you?" She advanced into my living room, her movements sharp and threatening. "The hospital said I had dioxin poisoning, heart medication. How did you know what I was using?" "I didn't," I said. "But you were careless enough to poison yourself with your weapon." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit down, Teresa. Let's discuss this like adults." "Adults?" Her laugh was bitter and harsh. "You want to talk about being adults? This house should be mine. You owe me after everything. I owe you nothing." My voice remained level despite the rage building in my chest. "You tried to murder me. The officers loaded them into separate vehicles. Standard procedure to prevent conspiracy conversations." Through my window, I watched Hubert arguing angrily with his arresting officer while Teresa sat in stunned silence. Detective Reynolds stayed behind to secure the crime scene and take my formal statement. "Mr. Brown, this level of evidence preparation is impressive. Military background, 30 years in the Army. I know how to prepare for hostile engagement. Well, your preparation just ended 2 criminal careers. They'll both be looking at significant prison time." As the squad cars pulled away with their lights flashing, I felt a strange emptiness settle over the house. The threat was gone, but so was the last connection to the family I'd once had. The red taillights disappeared into the darkness, taking my daughter and her conspirator toward the justice they'd earned. I stood in my doorway, finally free to close this chapter forever. 3 weeks later, I sat in the witness chair of the Cook County Courthouse. My testimony was the final nail in the coffin of my daughter's criminal conspiracy. The courtroom felt sterile and impersonal, exactly the right setting to end a relationship that had become nothing but legal proceedings. Judge Martinez reviewed the evidence one final time before delivering her verdict. The recordings, the detective's investigation, the poison analysis, the private investigator's documentation, everything painted a clear picture of premeditated attempted murder and extortion. The defendants are found guilty on all charges of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted poisoning, breaking, and extortion, she announced. Teresa sat at the defendant's table, staring at her hands. She'd aged years in the 3 weeks since her arrest. Hubert maintained his defiant posture, but his expensive suit couldn't hide the defeat in his shoulders. "Mr. Brown," the prosecutor said during the sentencing phase, "how do you feel about your daughter's conviction?" I looked directly at Teresa as I answered, "Sometimes justice requires difficult choices. I chose to protect future victims over protecting someone who tried to murder me." The judge sentenced Teresa to 6 years in state prison with a possibility of parole in 4 years. Hubert received 10 years due to his criminal history and role as the conspiracy's mastermind. Both would have permanent criminal records that would follow them for life. As court officers led them away, Teresa turned toward me one last time. "I'll never forgive you for this. I've already forgiven myself for protecting others from you," I replied. The gavel fell, and 28 years of fatherhood officially ended. Emily walked with me to the courthouse steps, where Marcus Sullivan waited with his final report. The private investigator had identified 2 other elderly victims of Hubert's previous schemes, providing closure to families who'd wondered about suspicious deaths. "Your testimony helped convict a serial predator," Marcus said, shaking my hand. "Those other families finally have answers." "What happens now?" Emily asked. "Now I start over." The house sold within 2 weeks to a young family with children who would fill it with laughter instead of deception. I kept only personal items and Margaret's photographs, donating everything else to veterans organizations. My new home was in a retirement community outside Tampa, surrounded by other military retirees who understood the value of honor and loyalty. The weather was warm, the neighbors were genuine, and nobody tried to poison my food. I volunteered at the local VA hospital, helping other veterans navigate family difficulties and elder abuse situations. My experience with Teresa, painful as it was, provided valuable insight for counseling others facing similar betrayals. Mrs. Patterson from next door brought me homemade cookies every Tuesday. Bill Martinez from across the street and I played chess every Thursday evening. These people chose to be part of my life, which made their friendship more valuable than blood relationships, based on obligation. 6 months after moving to Florida, I received a letter from Teresa. She'd found religion in prison and wanted to apologize, asking for another chance to be my daughter. I read it once, then filed it with the other legal documents from her case. Some bridges once burned should stay that way. Emily called occasionally to check on my adjustment to retirement. The veterans of foreign wars had used my estate donation to fund a new elder abuse prevention program, helping other seniors recognize and respond to family financial manipulation. "You saved more lives than just your own," she told me during our last conversation. That was the point. As I watched the Florida sunset from my new porch, surrounded by friends who valued honesty over blood relations, I knew I'd made the right choice. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. My phone rang. "Bill Martinez is calling about tomorrow's chess game." I answered with a smile, ready to enjoy an evening with people who would never try to poison my soup. The nightmare was over. Real life could finally begin. If you liked this story, please hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on this story in the comments. "You abandoned me after Mom died." She paced back and forth, her hands gesturing wildly. "You were cold, controlling, impossible to live with. I had to leave. You chose to leave. And now you've chosen to try killing me for money. You can't prove anything." Her voice cracked with desperation. "It's your word against mine. Who's going to believe a paranoid old veteran over his daughter?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot of the threatening text. "Your friends aren't very smart about covering their tracks." The color drained from her face. That wasn't from me." "No, but it was about you." Someone else is involved in this, isn't there? Someone who convinced you that murder was the solution to your problems. Teresa's eyes darted toward the window, then back to me. I don't know what you're talking about. Get out of my house now before I call the police. This is my house too, she shrieked. I grew up here. I have rights. You forfeited any rights. When you tried to poison me, I stood slowly, my full military bearing on display. You have 30 seconds to leave voluntarily, or I'm calling 911. She backed toward the door, but her eyes blazed with fury. Fine, but next time I come back, I won't be alone, and you'll regret this. There won't be a next time. Stay away or face the consequences. What consequences? What are you going to do, old man? You're alone. You have no one. I have the law on my side and evidence of everything you've done. She hesitated at the threshold, her face twisted with rage and fear. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Some people need this money. People who won't just walk away because you got lucky once. Then they can explain themselves to the police when I file my report tomorrow. You wouldn't dare. Try. Me. For a moment, we stared at each other across the wreckage of our destroyed relationship. Then Teresa turned and stalked toward her car. This isn't over, she shouted over her shoulder. You'll pay for humiliating me like this. The engine roared to life, and she sped out of the driveway, leaving tire marks on the asphalt. I watched her taillights disappear into the evening darkness, but her words echoed in my mind. I reached for my phone. It was time to find out exactly who was helping my daughter destroy our family. I dialed the number Emily had given me years ago, when divorce cases required discreet investigation. Tonight, I needed to know who was poisoning my daughters. Mind against me. Marcus Sullivan, Private Investigations. Mr. Sullivan, this is Simon Brown. Emily Carter referred me. I need immediate help with a family situation involving attempted murder. I can be at your location within the hour, Mr. Brown. This is regarding your daughter? Yes, and whoever's manipulating her. Marcus arrived exactly 60 minutes later, a thin, sharp-eyed man in his 50s who carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to uncovering secrets. I showed him the evidence I'd compiled, photos of the poison vial, medical reports from Teresa's hospital visit, and threatening text messages. Your daughter has been seeing Hubert Klein for 3 months, he said after reviewing my initial information. I've never heard that name. Who is he? Small-time con artist, fraud, identity, theft, real estate scams. He specializes in targeting people with property assets. Marcus pulled out a tablet and showed me a mugshot. Does this look familiar? The face was lean and predatory, with cold eyes and an artificial smile. I've never seen him before. He's been careful to stay away from your house, but he's been coaching your daughter extensively. Coaching her to do what? Kill you, inherit your assets, sell everything quickly, and disappear with the money. Marcus swiped to another screen. I have recordings. My blood turned to ice. Recordings of what? Conversations between them discussing the poisoning, the specific medication to use, timing for maximum effectiveness, plans for disposing of your body. The clinical way he delivered this information should have shocked me, but my military training kicked in. How did you get recordings so quickly? Your daughter isn't very security conscious. Neither is Klein. They've been meeting at the same coffee shop for weeks, sitting near windows, talking openly. He showed me photos of Teresa and a man I now recognized as Hubert. Basic surveillance equipment captured most of their planning sessions. My daughter. I struggled to process the scope of the betrayal. How could she fall for someone like that? Klein is good at what he does. He identifies vulnerable people, recently divorced, estranged from family, with financial problems, and offers them everything they think they want. Your daughter was perfect prey. Marcus spent the next hour walking me through a comprehensive dossier. Hubert Klein, 32, had been arrested 4 times for fraud. His usual pattern involved seducing women with property or inheritance potential, convincing them to steal from or manipulate family members, then disappearing with the proceeds. He's done this before, 3 times that we can prove. 2 cases resulted in theft, 1 in assault. This is his first attempted murder. What happened to his previous victims? Financial ruin. Criminal charges. 1 woman is still in prison for embezzling from her elderly mother's trust fund. The weight of evidence was overwhelming. Phone records showed dozens of calls between Teresa and Hubert. Financial documents reveal his mounting debts and desperate need for quick money. Real estate consultations where they discussed selling my house immediately after inheriting it. There's more, Marcus said, pulling up another file. They've already been in contact with a buyer. Cash sale, no inspections, quick closing. They had the whole scheme mapped out, even down to disposing of my body, cremation. They planned to tell people you'd requested it. No autopsy, no questions. I stared at the photos of my daughter and her accomplice, their heads bent together over coffee cups, planning my murder with the casualness of people discussing weekend plans. The betrayal was complete and calculated. What about the poison? Where did they get it? Klein has connections in the pharmaceutical black market. The dioxin was pure medical grade, expensive, and hard to trace. But they made a mistake, several. Most importantly, they underestimated you. Marcus closed his tablet and looked at me directly. Mr. Brown, these people are dangerous. The failed poisoning has made them desperate. They know you're aware of the plot, and they won't simply walk away from this much money. What do you recommend? Police involvement immediately. We have enough evidence for conspiracy to commit murder charges. And if they disappear before arrests can be made, then you remain in danger. Klein has a history of escalating when his schemes fail. I thought about Teresa's threats, her promise to return with help. How long before they try again? Days, not weeks. Probably sooner. I closed the thick folder of evidence, my daughter's betrayal now documented in stark black and white. Tomorrow, I would ensure she could never hurt anyone else. The way she'd tried to hurt me. The downtown traffic couldn't slow my determination as I carried the evidence of my daughter's betrayal toward Emily's law office, ready to ensure justice would prevail. The manila folder felt heavier than its actual weight, loaded with proof of my child's attempt to murder me for money. Emily's office occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower overlooking Lake Michigan. I'd been here before during Margaret's illness, handling medical directives and estate planning during happier times. Today, I was here to erase my daughter from my life forever. Simon, you look terrible, Emily said as her secretary showed me into the conference room. How are you holding up? Better than I was yesterday. I placed the investigation folder on her mahogany desk. I have everything we need. Emily opened the folder and began reading. Her expression grew grimmer with each page. Simon, this evidence is damning. Are you certain about disinheriting her completely? She made her choice. When she tried to poison me, the courts will want to see clear evidence of her intent to harm you personally, not just financial motivation. I have recordings, photographs, and witness testimony from the private investigator. I pointed to the audio transcripts. Is that enough? Emily studied the documents carefully. More than enough, but this is permanent. Once we file these papers, there's no undoing this decision. Good. She wanted my money so badly that she was willing to kill for it. Now she get nothing. What about a charitable designation? You mentioned veterans of foreign wars. Everything goes to them. The house, investments, life insurance, and pension benefits. Every dollar I earn goes to people who served honorably, not to someone who tried to murder me. Emily pulled out legal forms and began drafting. This will take several hours to complete. Properly, We need to ensure every possible challenge is anticipated and blocked. What about the house? Do you want additional security measures? Change all the locks, remove her access completely. Install security cameras. She's no longer my daughter. The legal language felt cold and final as Emily read each clause aloud. Complete revocation of previous will. Removal of Teresa Brown from all beneficiary designations. Transfer of power of attorney to Emily Carter. Medical directives exclude Teresa from any healthcare decisions. There's one more thing, Emily said, looking up from her papers. Given the evidence of criminal conspiracy, I strongly recommend involving law enforcement immediately. The private investigator suggested the same thing. Simon, these people attempted to murder you. They're not going to simply accept being cut out of a $500,000 inheritance. They'll escalate. I'm prepared for that. Are you? This. Hubert Klein has a history of violence when his schemes fail. The recordings show him discussing contingency plans if the poisoning didn't work. I thought about the threatening text message, Teresa's promise to return with help. What kind of contingency plans? Break-ins, assault, and making your death appear accidental. He's escalated before. Then we make sure the police have everything they need to arrest them both. Emily picked up her phone. I'm calling Detective Reynolds now. He handles financial crimes and has experience with family fraud cases. Do it. While Emily arranged the police meeting, I signed document after document. Each signature felt like severing another cord that had once connected me to my daughter. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using my will to declare her dead to me. The detective can meet us here at 3 o'clock, Emily announced. That gives us time to finish the estate changes and prepare a complete evidence package. How long before the new will takes effect? Immediately upon filing, which we'll do today. 2 hours later, the legal transformation was complete. Teresa Brown no longer existed in my legal universe. Every asset, every decision, every future consideration had been transferred away from her. Detective Reynolds arrived precisely at 3. A stocky man with intelligent eyes who listened to our evidence presentation without interruption. When we finished, he closed his notebook with a decisive snap. Mr. Brown, we have enough here for multiple felony charges. Conspiracy to commit murder, attempted poisoning, and terrorist threats. I'll have arrest warrants issued today. How quickly can you find them? We'll start with known addresses and associates. Given the evidence, I expect arrests within 48 hours. I walked out of Emily's office, legally protected, but emotionally empty, knowing that my preparations would soon be tested when Teresa discovered what I'd done. The motion sensors I'd installed 3 days ago chimed softly as 2 figures approached. My front door. Teresa had kept her promise. She wasn't alone this time. Through the security monitor I'd positioned by my chair, I watched them pause at the entrance, clearly planning their approach. Hubert Klein looked exactly like his mugshot, lean, predatory, with cold eyes that swept my property like a burglar evaluating defenses. He wore expensive clothes that didn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. Teresa stood beside him, her face hard with determination and barely controlled rage. I remained seated in my leather armchair, hands folded calmly in my lap. The hidden cameras were recording. The emergency button lay within easy reach. 5 days of preparation had led to this moment. They didn't knock. The front door rattled as Hubert tested the handle, then stepped back and simply kicked it open. The new deadbolt held, but the doorframe splintered with a sharp crack that echoed through my house. Mr. Brown, Hubert called as they entered uninvited. We need to have a conversation. Then you should have made an appointment, I replied without. Moving from my chair, Teresa peered first in my living room doorway, her eyes bright with fever or desperation. Dad, this is Hubert. We're here to make this simple. Hubert followed, filling the doorframe with calculated menace. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and projected the kind of casual confidence that came from intimidating, easier targets. "Sign these papers," he said, setting the briefcase on my coffee table with deliberate force. "Transfer the house and nobody gets hurt. And if I refuse?" Teresa's laugh carried a bitter edge. "Then we'll find another way to get what's mine, just like we tried before." I studied Hubert as he opened the briefcase and withdrew official-looking documents. "Your daughter deserves this inheritance. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Inheritance?" I kept my voice level. "You mean the money you planned to steal after murdering me?" "That was a misunderstanding," Hubert said smoothly. "Just a little medication to help you feel more cooperative." Unfortunately, Teresa mixed up the dosages. "You can't prove anything, old man," Teresa snapped, pacing behind Hubert like a caged animal. "I can prove everything." I gestured toward the ceiling corners where small cameras recorded our every word. "I've been recording this entire conversation." Hubert's confident smile faltered. His eyes darted to the locations I'd indicated, spotting the nearly invisible lenses. "Those won't be admissible in court without consent. Illinois is a one-party consent state for recording conversations in private residences," I said calmly. "I've already given my consent." "Smart old man," Hubert snarled, his polished facade cracking, but not smart enough to keep his mouth shut. He moved closer, using his height advantage to tower over my chair. "You're going to sign these papers, transfer the house to your loving daughter, and forget this conversation ever happened." "Or what? Or accidents happen to stubborn old veterans who live alone." Teresa joined him, both now standing within arm's reach. "Dad, just sign the papers. We'll leave you alone after that." "Will you? The way you left me alone after poisoning my soup?" "That wasn't poison," she protested. "It was just supposed to make you sick enough to need help. Help from a daughter who wanted to inherit faster." Hubert pulled a pen from his jacket and threw it onto the documents. "Enough talk. Sign these now, or we'll find more creative ways to change your mind." I looked at the forged papers, then at my daughter's desperate face, then at the criminal who'd corrupted her with promises of easy money. Everything was being recorded. Every threat was documented. Every criminal statement was preserved for the prosecution. "I have a better idea," I said, reaching beneath my chair. As Hubert stepped closer with his fist raised, I pressed the small button hidden beneath my chair. Help was already on the way. The wail of sirens cut through Hubert's threats like a sword through silence. His confident sneer faltered as red and blue lights began painting my living room walls through the curtained windows. Teresa's face went white as she recognized the sound of approaching justice. "You called the cops." Hubert spun toward the window, his carefully maintained composure cracking completely. "When?" "5 minutes ago," I said calmly. "Silent alarm system. Very reliable." Teresa backed toward the hallway, panic overtaking her earlier bravado. "Dad, how could you call the police on your daughter? You stopped being my daughter when you tried to poison me." Car doors slammed outside. Heavy footsteps approached the broken front door. "Chicago police. Mr. Brown, are you all right?" "I'm fine, officers. The intruders are in the living room with me." Detective Reynolds appeared first, service weapon drawn but lowered, followed by 2 uniformed officers. His eyes took in the broken door, the scattered papers, and the 2 criminals caught in the act. "Mr. Brown, you reported threats and attempted extortion." "Detective, I have video and audio recordings of everything that just happened." I gestured toward the hidden cameras, including admissions to the previous murder attempt. "This is harassment." Hubert stepped forward aggressively before stopping as all 3 officers focused on him. "We haven't done anything wrong, sir." "We have recordings of you threatening this man in his own home," Detective Reynolds said firmly. "Please place your hands behind your back." "Dad, please," Teresa pleaded as the second officer moved toward her. "We can work this out." "Family doesn't Do this to family. Family doesn't try to murder each other for money, I replied. Detective, I also have evidence of a previous murder attempt and fraud conspiracy. Reynolds nodded as his partner began handcuffing Hubert. We've been looking for both of you since yesterday. Outstanding warrants for conspiracy to commit murder. Teresa's legs buckled. She grabbed the doorframe for support as the reality of her situation crashed down. Warrants? But we never. Dad is fine. Ma'am, attempted murder is still a felony even when it fails. The third officer read them their Miranda rights while Reynolds examined the forged documents Hubert had brought. The briefcase contained not just property transfer papers, but detailed financial information about my assets, evidence of extensive planning. Mr. Brown, these recordings will be crucial evidence, Reynolds said, carefully bagging the papers. How long have you been documenting their activities? Since the first poisoning attempt 6 days ago. I have video of tonight's break-in, audio of their confessions, and written threats they sent previously. Dad, you recorded us? Teresa's voice cracked as the officer guided her hands behind her back. Your daughter? I recorded criminals confessing to attempted murder and planning future violence. Hubert tried one last manipulative gambit. Officer, this old man is unstable. He's making up stories about his own family. Sir, we have independent evidence from a private investigation, Reynolds replied coldly. Your criminal record speaks for itself. As they were led toward the squad cars, Teresa turned back one final time. I'll never forgive you for this. I've already forgiven myself for protecting others from you, I said. The officers loaded them into separate vehicles. Standard procedure to prevent conspiracy conversations. Through my window, I watched Hubert arguing angrily with his arresting officer while Teresa sat in stunned silence. Detective Reynolds stayed behind to secure the crime scene and take my formal statement. Mr. Brown, this level of evidence preparation is impressive. Military background, 30 years in the Army. I know how to prepare for hostile engagement. Well, your preparation just ended 2 criminal careers. They'll both be looking at significant prison time. As the squad cars pulled away with their lights flashing, I felt a strange emptiness settle over the house. The threat was gone, but so was the last connection to the family I'd once had. The red taillights disappeared into the darkness, taking my daughter and her conspirator toward the justice they'd earned. I stood in my doorway, finally free to close this chapter forever. 3 weeks later, I sat in the witness chair of the Cook County Courthouse. My testimony was the final nail in the coffin of my daughter's criminal conspiracy. The courtroom felt sterile and impersonal, exactly the right setting to end a relationship that had become nothing but legal proceedings. Judge Martinez reviewed the evidence one final time before delivering her verdict. The recordings, the detective's investigation, the poison analysis, the private investigator's documentation, everything painted a clear picture of premeditated attempted murder and extortion. The defendants are found guilty on all charges of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted poisoning, breaking, and extortion, she announced. Teresa sat at the defendant's table, staring at her hands. She'd aged years in the 3 weeks since her arrest. Hubert maintained his defiant posture, but his expensive suit couldn't hide the defeat in his shoulders. Mr. Brown, the prosecutor said during the sentencing phase, how do you feel about your daughter's conviction? I looked directly at Teresa as I answered. Sometimes justice requires difficult choices. I chose to protect future victims over protecting someone who tried to murder me. The judge sentenced Teresa to 6 years in state prison with a possibility of parole in 4 years. Hubert received 10 years due to his criminal history and role as the conspiracy's mastermind. Both would have permanent criminal records that would follow them for life. As court officers led them away, Teresa turned toward me one last time. I'll never forgive you for this. I've already forgiven myself for protecting others from you. I replied. The gavel fell, and 28 years of fatherhood officially ended. Emily walked with me to the courthouse steps, where Marcus Sullivan waited with his final report. The private investigator had identified 2 other elderly victims of Hubert's previous schemes, providing closure to families who'd wondered about suspicious deaths. Your testimony helped convict a serial predator, Marcus said, shaking my hand. Those other families finally have answers. What happens now? Emily asked. Now I start over. The house sold within 2 weeks to a young family with children who would fill it with laughter instead of deception. I kept only personal items and Margaret's photographs, donating everything else to veterans organizations. My new home was in a retirement community outside Tampa, surrounded by other military retirees who understood the value of honor and loyalty. The weather was warm, the neighbors were genuine, and nobody tried to poison my food. I volunteered at the local VA hospital, helping other veterans navigate family difficulties and elder abuse situations. My experience with Teresa, painful as it was, provided valuable insight for counseling others facing similar betrayals. Mrs. Patterson from next door brought me homemade cookies every Tuesday. Bill Martinez from across the street and I played chess every Thursday evening. These people chose to be part of my life, which made their friendship more valuable than blood relationships based on obligation. 6 months after moving to Florida, I received a letter from Teresa. She'd found religion in prison and wanted to apologize, asking for another chance to be my daughter. I read it once, then filed it with the other legal documents from her case. Some bridges once burned should stay that way. Emily called occasionally to check on my adjustment to retirement. The veterans of foreign wars had used my estate donation to fund a new elder abuse prevention program, helping other seniors recognize and respond to family financial manipulation. You saved more lives than just your own, she told me during our last conversation. That was the point. As I watched the Florida sunset from my new porch, surrounded by friends who valued honesty over blood relations, I knew I'd made the right choice. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. My phone rang. Bill Martinez is calling about tomorrow's chess game. I answered with a smile, ready to enjoy an evening with people who would never try to poison my soup. The nightmare was over. Real life could finally begin. If you liked this story, please hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on this story in the comments.